Thank you, Madam Speaker. In April, when we discussed the long-standing problem of abandoned vessels, Transport Canada said it is, quote, developing options. We are on top of it. We are taking care of it. We are developing a comprehensive approach, and we are addressing it as quickly as possible. Those are all quotes from our debate on that day. Now, that was 5 months ago, when a solution sounded imminent. So I'm interested today in hearing what the elements of the government's plan are now, 5 months later. In the spring, I secured a Department of Fisheries and Oceans agreement to remove the Vicky Lynn 2, an abandoned vessel that had been languishing in Ladysmith Harbour for 4 years since Transport Canada towed it in there. I mean, it was deemed by Coast Guard to be an imminent threat to sink. So it's great news that the government agreed with my proposal that it remove it. The government is now negotiating over a bid, and we hope that the contract will be awarded shortly. But the worrying part is that initially DFO thought that the vessel would have been removed by the end of August. So now we're at the end of September. We still don't actually have a contract in place. So these things are moving slowly. Now, this summer, I heard from 2,500 community members about their advice and views on abandoned vessels. We heard from marina operators, businessmen, businesswomen, local governments. They all told me that the abandoned vessel problem has not gotten better, it's gotten worse. And we know that not dealing with the problem has real costs. BC Ferries hit a submerged vessel in the spring, and they said that abandoned vessels endanger the safety of their passengers and crew, and that they cost them in travel delays. The shellfish industry says jobs are at risk, and if an abandoned vessel is submerged, shellfish harvesting is shut down. As Kathleen Nichols from Limberis Seafood Processing in Ladysmith says, quote, we suffer economic losses. No product equals no sales. And tourism operators throughout our region say on our coast that it costs them. And it's frustrating to see problem vessels shifted from one bay to another. So what are the solutions? End the runaround and finger-pointing by adopting my bill, C-219, to designate the Coast Guard as the responsible department to deal with abandoned vessels. Build Coast Guard budgets and staffing back up so that we can look after our coast responsibly. Create more recycling facilities for fibreglass and support local salvage businesses. Create a vessel turn-in program like Oregon State does, and update the vessel registration system and use license fees to pay for disposal costs like Washington State has. So there are great ideas out there, and I am eager to hear the government's plan. What's your good news? How fast is your timeline? 5 months ago, it sounded like the work was well underway. We want to hear the elements of your plan to solve the abandoned vessel problem once and for all, and to protect our coasts from their environmental and economic risks. Thank you.
Reminder to the member to address the chair on the questions, as opposed to you. It's to me. So the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To begin with, I wish to reaffirm this government's commitment to protecting Canada's marine and coastal areas while also improving marine safety. These are important elements of the mandate letters of the Ministers of Transport, Fisheries and Oceans, and Environment and Climate Change. We take very seriously our evidence-based approach to decision-making and understand that a clean environment and a strong economy go hand in hand. And I want to assure members that we are aware of the interest in this issue from across the country. Madam Speaker, it is clear that coastal communities in British Columbia, Quebec, and in the Atlantic region consider the issue of abandoned and derelict vessels and wrecks as one that negatively affects their enjoyment of their local marine environment. Several of these communities have gone so far as to endorse resolutions calling on federal action to address this problem, including with new legislation. We are aware of the issues these vessels of concern can present to the marine environment, safe navigation, public health and safety, and to the local economies. In May of this year, this government spoke in support of private members' motion M40, which lays out a comprehensive approach to begin to effectively address this issue. Motion M40 supports our government's commitment to protect Canada's freshwater resources and oceans. It proposes that the government address gaps in existing authorities. This is a complex, multi-jurisdictional issue at the nexus between safety, environmental, and commercial interests. We will have a comprehensive plan soon. It will not be a boat-by-boat approach. We need to ensure we have in place a prevention regime that is solid before focusing extensive efforts on remediation. We are carefully examining best practices from other jurisdictions, such as Washington State's derelict vessels removal regime, and are looking at how best to adapt them to the Canadian context. In the meantime, the Canadian Coast Guard is managing the environmental risks, and Transport Canada is managing the navigation and safety risks. In addition, Transport Canada created an abandoned boats and wrecks webpage in May 2015 to strengthen owner awareness of their responsibilities regarding vessel end-of-life management and enhance accessibility of information for the public. Our government's support of Motion M40 clearly signals our intent to move forward with concrete action to tackle the issue. We are currently studying a number of options. We are exploring measures to prevent owners from abandoning their vessels in the first place. We need to engage stakeholders to ensure we get it right. We are working with our partners and enhancing consultations with provinces who also have an important role to play. To conclude, Madam Speaker, I wish to reiterate this government takes the issue of abandoned vessels and wrecks very seriously, and we will have more to say on this in the coming months.
The honourable member for Nanaimo-Ladysmith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With respect, a web page or a motion does nothing to address the real environmental and economic costs that coastal communities have been suffering for 2 decades now under successive Liberal and Conservative governments. I mean, I know this. Over 12 years elected to local government, we passed several dozen resolutions calling for federal action, provincial action on abandoned vessels, and I appreciate the government's intention to support the motion from my colleague opposite, but the motion does not change anything on the ground for coastal communities. When we spoke in April, it sounded like your comprehensive plan was imminent. These are direct quotes from Hansard. So please tell me, what is your timeline to table legislation in this House that will deal with abandoned vessels legislatively forever after, once and for all? Thank you.
Yeah.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Madam Speaker, we are exploring a proactive national strategy to address the problems posed by abandoned vessels and wrecks. However, as I mentioned, the issues are complex, and getting the details and the collaboration right is critical. These challenges have emerged over decades, as the honourable member said, and cannot be fixed overnight. A key lesson we have learned from other jurisdictions is to ensure we get the prevention regime right first. We must also be mindful of the cost to taxpayers of addressing problem vessels. Owners must be held responsible. Any action by governments must be focused on a risk-based approach. All levels of government have a role to play. This government takes the issue of abandoned vessels and wrecks very seriously, which is why we supported private members' motion M40 on abandoned vessels that was tabled earlier this year by the honourable member for South Shore St. Margaret's, and are committed to working in an open and collaborative manner to improve marine safety from coast to coast to coast.